Welcome to the Jaded podcast.
All right. Hello, everyone. Sorry it's been a little bit of a delay. I have had a crazy week with work and getting ready for this baby. I've been in like full nesting mode here in the last few days, which has made me a tad bit uncomfortable because this baby feels like he could fall out at any moment all the time. But anyways, so I promised you an episode. I figured, light. Well, it's not really light, but we can make it as light as possible. With the birth story of Brock, because I feel like I left off last year telling you while I was pregnant, and then we hadn't heard from each other since then. So we're gonna go into that in just a moment. We gotta pay a little bit of bills. So found out I was pregnant in January or February that year with Brock. And that's my child's name, Brock. And had a pretty uneventful pregnancy. As far as, medically, everything medically was fine. We were scheduled to be induced. So my due date was October 2nd. I was scheduled to be induced on the 29th. The doctor told me if I hadn't gone into labor by that particular Monday, I think I had a doctor's appointment on like Thursday. Friday. He said if I didn't go into labor by Monday, they would induce me. So I was like, all right, cool. Go home Friday. Everything's fine. I will say up until that point, I had what's called prodromal labor. I might be saying that wrong. But basically, every night for like 2 weeks leading up to that, I was having contractions, and I mean contractions, not Braxton Hicks, but real contractions. And I would have them for like 4 or 5 hours, sometimes even 6, and then it would stop. So I wasn't getting any sleep. My body was exhausted because it was literally in pre-labor. So that was happening for a while. So Saturday night, we were getting the kids ready for bed, and I just sat down from doing something. It was about 11:30 that night, and I felt a pop. And with my first two, children, I didn't feel a pop. My water broke in the hospital because they broke it. So I'd never gone through my water breaking. So I feel this pop, and I'm like, And I said, Broderick, I think my water broke. And he's like, are you sure? And I get up, and literally like a big gush just comes out. And then I was leaking everywhere, and I was like, we both looked at each other like, yeah, definitely water break. Definitely that your water broke. So, and we're not first timers to this at all. So we had already had my bags packed, but because I had never experienced my water breaking, we forgot pillows. We forgot like my blanket, because we were like, we need to get to the hospital. Because like I said, I just never had that happen before. So get to the hospital, and they check, and they're like, yeah, your water did break. And I think at the time I was at like 4 centimeters or something like that. Labor for him went pretty quickly. My water broke around 11:30, and by 1, I was in active labor. 1 a.m. I was in active labor. And my goal was to do this all natural. No epidural, no drugs. I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm Superwoman. So I managed. So in total, I had him at 8:34 Sunday morning. So I was in labor start to finish, 11:30 to 8:34. An hour, maybe an hour and a half before I actually started pushing, that's when I gave in. I was literally in there screaming bloody murder. And all that to say, like when I was in labor with Bella and Brianni, I wasn't a loud laborer, if that makes sense. Like they would come and I would just like breathe through it. Now I didn't want anyone touching me, anything like that, but I wasn't loud. I wasn't vocal. You could see, I would, make little noises, but it wasn't this time around. I felt like I was in some show on TV and they're showing a woman in labor, that stereotypical, she's yelling and is basically clinging. I was shaking like uncontrollably. And the doctors and the nurses were like, ma'am, you're not really handling the pain very well. You shouldn't, not to say that labor isn't supposed to be painful, but they were like, you don't have to do this. So I ended up getting fentanyl because I didn't want to go ahead and I didn't want to get the epidural because I just don't like the way it makes your body feel. So I got fentanyl, but that was a big mistake as well because I was still feeling all the pain, but it felt like I was hovering over my body. So I felt like I couldn't even center myself enough to get through each contraction. So they were like, you can go ahead and we can give you another dose. And I was like, absolutely not. If I'm gonna be in pain, I'd much rather be in pain and be able to get through it than to be in pain and feel like I'm not even inside my body. So I then go ahead and get the epidural because at that point I literally felt like I couldn't take anymore. Get the epidural, and I think 30-45 minutes goes by, and they're like, all right, it's time to push. And I guess my body had relaxed enough to, get the last couple centimeters out. Pushing, I think I pushed maybe 3 or 4 times. He came right on out. And he was perfect. 6 pounds, 14 ounces of just perfect. And, but then that's when, so the first part of my hospital stay, they took out my epidural. Epidural, you come off the pump for your epidural. They took out my catheter because, when you get an epidural, you can't feel from the waist down. So they catheterize you so that you don't urinate all over yourself. So had the catheter, they took it out, and I could not use the bathroom. But my bladder was full, and it was so full that it was starting to, I can't think of what it's called, but basically my bladder kept overfilling. So to make sure that I didn't, it didn't burst or anything like that, they went ahead and recatheterized me without pain medication, might I add. It is very uncomfortable. So I was on a catheter for a while until I could urinate by myself, which took a while. Like I would feel the urge to need to pee and could literally not push anything out because of something that happens during labor. Don't have me lying to y'all with the terms because I can't remember it, but couldn't urinate. So we get that fixed. I was only in the hospital for 24 hours because everything else was fine. They were like, you're not a first-time mom. Everything is looking good. We can go ahead and discharge you. And of course we're like, bet, let's go ahead and go home, get in the routine, get packed up. We get home. First night, having a newborn again. I hadn't personally had a newborn in 8 years at that point. So going through this stuff, up all night and all that. And I was nursing. I did nurse Brianni. I didn't nurse Bella. But again, like I said, it had been 8 years. So, relearning that, him learning, all of that. Day 2, I start to feel pain in my chest. Like it hurt to breathe. Like it felt like it was taking so much out of me to catch my breath. So I just kind of ignored it. Like, yeah, it's all right. I'll be okay. It's probably just, coming out of just having a baby. As the day went on, right up under my right side was, every time I took a breath, so it hurt to breathe, but in addition to that, every time I took a breath on my right side, it literally felt like somebody was punching me, like that meatier part where you're right as your back is going into your stomach. And so I told Broderick, I said, I think I need to go to I think I need to call the doctor because something feels weird. So, they always tell you about making sure that if anything, like if you're feeling weird or whatever, you call the doctor, because what I was worried about and what they kept emphasizing were blood clots. So, I was like, well, maybe I have a blood clot or something, because I'd never had anything like this happen before. So I was like, let's call the doctor. So I call the doctor and they're like, well, I mean, you might be okay, you might not, but to be on the safe side, if you feel like it, go ahead and go to the ER. So at first I said, well, Broderick, maybe I can just wait to go to the doctor in the morning, because this was really late at night. The kids had just gotten home from school. We had my godmother had come over to come, see the baby. And I said, well, I don't really want to go. But then something told me, Brianna, you know what? No, don't wait. Go ahead and go to the hospital. And I'm sorry, y'all, I'm winded. I'm pregnant now. And every word I say feels like I'm running a marathon. But so when we go ahead and go, we bring the baby because Broderick didn't want to leave him at the time with my godmother. And that's no knock to her. It was just like, it's our new baby. We don't want to leave him at home. And we really thought that we would be in and out. We thought that they would say, everything's okay. Good of you to come in, but you'll be fine. So we get in there, get checked in. Broderick stays in the car with the baby because you can't have the baby in the emergency room. They start taking my vitals, taking samples, all of that. So I'm on the blood pressure cup, the one that continuously takes your blood pressure like every 10 to 15 minutes, something like that. The ER doctor comes in, nice looking guy. He looked like he might have been in his 30s, white ER doctor. And I say that because it comes up later. He says, so Mrs. Milner, are you nervous? And I said, I mean, only in the sense that I'm back in the hospital and I've never had to come back I've never felt bad enough that I had to come back in the hospital after having a baby. But I'm not doctors, hospitals, that doesn't make me overly anxious or anything like that. I'm fine. I said, I worked in the medical field before. It doesn't bother me. He says, okay. He's still taking my blood pressure. So he comes back in after maybe about an hour and he says, so your blood pressure is a little elevated. At the time, I think it was, or the ones that he was telling me about, they were like in the 150s over 90 something. And he says, yeah, your blood pressure is a little elevated. We're going to continue to monitor, but we do want to go ahead and make sure you don't have any blood clots. So they take me for a CAT scan, do the CAT scan. I don't have any blood clots, and I'm like, thank God, because that's all I was worried about. And I thought they'd send me home. And then he comes back in maybe 45 minutes after they go over those results with me, and they say, well, how do you feel about, because your blood pressure is a little elevated, how do you feel about going home on just the blood pressure medicine? And we go from there. I said, well, if that's what you all think I need, because when I say I worked in the medical field, that does not mean that I was a medical doctor or a nurse. I just work. The medical field, spans a lot. So I was like, if that's what you all think is, if that's what you feel comfortable with, I feel confident with that. And he says, okay. And then in the meantime, right before they were about to bring in my discharge papers. My L&D doctor, she just happened to be there. She was not assigned to the floor. I think she had come down for something else. She saw my name and started to ask questions because literally they had just seen me like the day before. And she says, she's looking at my stuff and she apparently tells him she's not going anywhere. She needs to go up to L&D, which is labor and delivery. So they come back and another nurse comes in, not the ER doctor that I'd been speaking with up until that point comes in and says, we're not discharging you. We're actually taking you up to labor and delivery. And I said, okay. So I call my husband and I tell him, go ahead and go home because they're admitting me upstairs. I'll give you more information as I get it. He says, okay. I go upstairs. Come to find out, my blood pressures had been in the 200s for quite some time. And they weren't going down with giving me fluids and all the other things that they do prior to telling you what's going on. So get upstairs and then they start with all the scary stuff. They said, ma'am, do you know why you're up here? I said, no, they told me that I didn't have a blood clot, but that my blood pressure wasn't going down. And she says, no, it's not. You have postpartum preeclampsia. I had never heard of this. You hear preeclampsia, which happens typically while you are still pregnant, typically after about 20 weeks. But I had never heard of it happening after you give birth. And apparently it's very rare. But anyways, my blood pressure was through the roof. It was like 200s, 200 and above, over like 100. It was quite ridiculous. By that time, when they had taken me upstairs, the reason I was feeling pain in my right side is my liver was failing. And I guess toxins were starting to build up because my liver wasn't working properly. And my blood pressure was crazy. And as you know, with blood pressure, if it goes up too high, you could possibly have a stroke. Lots of things can go on. So essentially my body was starting to shut down on me. And I could have not been here. It's kind of hard to talk about, but it's scary. It definitely scares me with this baby. Literally after that, I had told Broderick I didn't want to have any more kids. I didn't want to have any more, but that happening kind of put the nail in the coffin for me. But then I ended up pregnant again. So, but anyways, so yes, I stayed in the hospital for about, I think 2 more days where they administered, I think they put me on magnesium, which feels terrible. It makes you feel dizzy. And I've been on magnesium before. I'd been on it with, when I was pregnant with Bella, because I went into preterm labor with her and they gave me magnesium to stop my contractions. So I've been on it before, but I didn't remember the side effects being as bad as they were. I remember it feeling bad, but I didn't remember it being this bad. So but yes, I felt terrible. Headaches, hot flashes, I felt like I couldn't walk by myself because I was so dizzy, and so lightheaded. But what they do is they give you that to keep your blood pressure from getting any higher as they try to get it to come back down. So they do that so you don't reach the threshold of stroke level, because I had been there for quite some time. So did that. The first day, I guess whatever liver test they gave me, it wasn't good enough. So that's why I ended up staying another night in the hospital. And then during that time, that is when my blood pressure got down to a point where they felt like I could go home. It wasn't going back up. And it wasn't going back up. So they sent me home and put me on labetalol. I think that's what it's called. And I was on that for a few months while monitoring my blood pressure, and I was taking my blood pressure every day. But all that to say, that happening made me look more into, I had heard about the mortality rate for Black and brown women of color in general, when it comes to having children. But I had never experienced anything with anyone in my inner circle or personally. And this is where it comes up. I had mentioned earlier that the doctor, he attributed and was going to send me home, knowing that my blood pressures had been in the 200s and up, with his rationale being that I was nervous about being in the hospital. And even if you did think I was nervous or very anxious, no one should be going home with blood pressures at that point. And he was ready to send me home. And I had that doctor not been there to say, absolutely not, she needs to go upstairs, and basically advocated for me when I didn't know I needed to advocate for myself. Because again, at the time, I didn't know that my blood pressures were that high. I could have possibly left my husband with, 3 kids. So after that, all that to say, I kind of looked more into it and found more and more stories of this happening. Not even just with postpartum preeclampsia, but with symptoms being looked at as if women are exaggerating, or because of the bias that goes on in the medical community when it comes to women of color. It's astounding. It's crazy. I know my sister-in-law, she just graduated from high school. She literally wants to become an OBGYN to help combat that. I made it a point with my son, Brock, when I was, looking for an OBGYN, to find an OBGYN that the doctors in its practice are Black, because they listen to you. You feel more comfortable. I felt like my voice was being heard. Not to mention the doctor that happened to be on the floor, she actually worked for our practice, and that's why she knew my name. And she had just delivered my child. And knew that, that my pregnancy had been, pretty normal, and that my blood pressure had never been that high. And then for me to have the issues I was having, immediately saying, no, send her upstairs. It's quite shocking that it's still happening. This was in 2020. So I wouldn't consider myself like I'm raising hell about it, but I do find times where I can talk about it. I post whenever I do see anything come up, or when I hear something in the media about it, on Facebook or on my Instagram or anything like that, because it is something that needs to be talked about. We can't fix a problem until people recognize it as a problem. And I personally, I thank her. I see her quite often. I actually saw her today. I had a doctor's appointment today. And I thank her every day for saving my life. And she doesn't take it as that. She likes to be very humble. And she says, oh, it's my job. It's my job. I understand. But just like the other doctor, you could have sent me home. And I could possibly, maybe even if I did make it, I might not have all my faculties. I might not be the mother that I wanted to be. So I just appreciate her and everything. But this is just to bring, to round it back out, to bring awareness to those things for some people who had never even, like I said, I'd never heard of postpartum preeclampsia. You hear preeclampsia all the time. But I never heard of postpartum preeclampsia, or what to look for when it comes to postpartum preeclampsia, because some of the other symptoms that they tell you to look for, like headaches and things of that nature, I had that too, but I just attributed it to literally just having a baby, being tired, and I was willing to just thug it out. But I am glad that I listened to my gut, and my gut told me, no, even if nothing is wrong, it's better to play on the safe side than to regret it later. And I am thankful that I listened to my intuition. And this is to say to all women, especially women of color, Black women in particular, because I'm a Black woman. Because we always feel like we have to be strong, we always have to hold it together. Sometimes we let our symptoms go by the wayside. Don't do that. The only way you can be a good mother is if you're here. And that means we have to listen to our bodies. When your body is trying to tell you something, you need to listen to it. Don't have the mentality that it can be fixed tomorrow. Because honestly, had I waited till tomorrow, that day, again, even if I would have made it, I probably wouldn't be able to sit and record this podcast today. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. Even if no one else is advocating for you, try to advocate for yourself. I've made sure this time around, because again, not wanting to have to go through this again, being away from my newborn. I was away from him for what I think I said 3 days. So not wanting that to happen this time around, being more vigilant when it comes to caring for now. But again, I was perfectly healthy the entire pregnancy, and then this happened. So it's not like something, I had the signs all throughout my pregnancy. I didn't. So just making sure that you're paying attention. And when you feel something, and husbands, when you see something isn't right, or you feel something isn't right, say something so that you can have her around and she can be the mother that she wants to be. Okay, so that's it for this episode. That's enough heavy topics for right now. Thank you all for listening. We will be back next week. Hopefully, the only reason I wouldn't be is if I have this baby. And even I'm going to still try to record, even if it's not a whole episode. Maybe even while I'm in the hospital, we'll see. But if it is delayed, it is because I have had the new Little Bird Song edition. So y'all just be patient with me. Give me a little bit of grace as I'm trying to get back into this full time. Love y'all. Peace. Check us out on Instagram at jaded_heart, or you can find me on Instagram at Brit, Birdsong. All right. See y'all later.